Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's August 27, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank the Venice community and James Joyce Finnegan's Wake Reading Club for pretty much getting us together with today's guest, Jeremy Kagan. Where in the heck are you calling in from, Jeremy?
Right around the corner. I'm over here in Venice.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Kindness to others.
Oh, I love that. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I want to say dreams.
Oh my God, I never forget that.
But that's really not accurate. I'm a media guy, so my information comes from the TV, from this thing, from the computer that we're on. That's source, and of course, endless libraries. So I mean, those are my sources of information. And if I'm lucky, a conversation with someone who really knows what they're talking about.
I love that too. Now let's go to books for a second. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did an example, or three, on your own?
Definitely through my parents.
Yeah.
Fascinating to look at my granddaughter, who would have answered the question. She chose to do it.
Yeah. Amazing. So
definitely my parents.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, two things. I think humans being, first of all, collect to provide a certain kind of security. I mean, you can see I got stuff here. If we turn this camera around, you would see this office just filled with things. So there's something about having things that you care about, images that you care about, at least for me, around me, gives me a kind of security, a kind of pleasure, a kind of remembering. Collecting information is a whole other thing, because that's sort of like, where do you collect information and how do you collect information? These days, I buy fewer books, although I will get sometimes graphic novels, which I'm into a lot. I certainly don't buy DVDs anymore or any of that. So the collectible information is, interestingly enough, on digital sources. So the digital source of the computer has, an endless information that I have here. The TV in its DVR has endless information that I have as well. So it's a sort of fascinating where the collections are.
It's really good. You anticipated a question. I've been working 2 years on a film about archiving, but we'll get to that. That really was good. Now, do you think this need or want to collect or gather information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's, to me, more inventive, because the nature of the time we live in. I remember someone in college talking about one of the things that was a characteristic of the American sort of personality was inventiveness, inventions. And I think that was true through the 19th century, where, if you looked at patents, so many came out of the Americas. But the sort of the need to have it is kind of, I think, a more present and therefore more possible because of the inventions that we have, and therefore there is much greater possibilities to collect and reflect on this if you have time.
I appreciate you're very articulate and concise. Thank you, because this word inventiveness is amazing, because I remember 15 or 20 years ago when I read the front page of the New York Times, and it said, "Rare Parliament Funkadelic video is on the computer." And I says, "Oh my God," because I'm huge into them. And then I literally told my friend, and he kind of yelled at me a couple weeks later, says, "I went down a rabbit hole." And then that warned me, and I wouldn't do YouTube for like 10 years. I made one the year it came out, but I wouldn't do it. Now I'm stupidly, horribly addicted to YouTube.
Watch this. There's a new movie just came out, a documentary called Made in Britain. The movie is about these two great British filmmakers, Powell and Pressburger, who made movies like The Red Shoes.
Oh,
Fabulous,
I know.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I wanted to see a version of a movie of theirs that I like. It's in the English version of it is called A Matter of Life and Death, and the American one was called Staircase to Heaven.
Yeah.
Well, I start typing where is it, and I find out Apple Plus has it. Okay, fine. I think I have Apple Plus. I go to it. It's not there. And I hear it again, and it's like YouTube. And I'm thinking, oh, YouTube, the quality. But I go to it. It's a phenomenally good print. And then a student tells me 2 days ago, there was an amazing sort of spectacular movie made in Russia, I don't know, 40 years ago, of the War and Peace, Tolstoy's War and Peace. Long movie, like 8 hours or not 10 hours or something like that. And you can never find it anywhere. Student says, it's on YouTube. Go to YouTube 3 days ago. Up comes the 4, sections of it, each one 2 hours. And the quality is a digital remaster. It's spectacular. So what's happened to YouTube in terms of quality, besides just in terms of accessibility of everything? And then someone said something very important to me just a couple days ago, because although I have TikTok, I'm not into it. And I was interested in it particularly because apparently half of America is into TikTok, which is amazing. And because I've heard that new filmmakers are able to make these sort of strange, 2-minute, 3-minute sections of a series that they put out. Apparently, it's very popular in China. I think there's American versions as well, and they were able to actually get monetized from this. So I heard. I was talking to one of my colleagues 2 days ago at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, where I'm a professor, and the colleague teaches this stuff and said, "Nah, it's just not true. TikTok is only about receiving. It's never about participating. You can, of course, put stuff up, but you can't do like YouTube channels where, if you're looking for something or want to get into a dialogue, YouTube provides this possibility where TikTok does not. TikTok is about you receiving. Yes, I guess, of course, you can make stuff and be part of that, but there's no control aspect in terms of what you get. So I was fascinated with that distinction being made in terms of information, because TikTok's about you get information, but you don't control even the information you get. If you stay on something for a couple seconds, it may not repeat, and you can do this dismiss or process where you won't get a repeat of the dog jumping up and down doing flips because you don't want it. But if you stay on something for 10 or 15 seconds, it's there. Forget it. You're going to just get that stuff endlessly because of the various ways they compute to get you.
Really good, Jeremy. A couple things. McLuhan said it best. The future of the book is the blurb. My friend makes commercials. They went down from 60 seconds to 30 seconds, and now they're 2 or 3 seconds. So this is the reducing of time. But we also have to note that the radio became a two-way medium eventually with talk radio. So it was a one-way medium. So TikTok will become two-way eventually, blah, blah, blah. And it is a way to promote your stuff. And, I don't make them, and I regret that I don't make them yet. I wish I could find someone young to help me make them, but I do watch them because they're on YouTube. So people go, are you on, because everybody's like, oh, I don't do Instagram, TikTok, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, YouTube has TikTok on it. So I am doing TikTok. That is not doing it. I am receiving it, as you say. Yeah.
And also I feel sort of Instagram is still much more a participatory way of getting your information out and receiving information. But this whole issue of how much do you control what you get? And there's this Hopi phrase, which is really essential. I teach a class called Media for Social Change, and I open it up with this. It's a tribute to the Hopis. And the line is, who controls the story? Rules.
Yeah.
Who controls the story? Rules.
Yeah.
And if you think about that in terms of politics, in terms of social ethics, it's a very profound, simple statement. Who controls the story? Rules.
Yeah, that's Sun Ra, the jazz shaman, said, it's his story. It's not my story. It's his story. And we know that from feminism. It's her story also.
Or if
It's
we're going
not
to be really political correct, we're going to have to say it's their story.
story. Exactly. Okay. Do thoughts create emotions?
And the answer is for me, and this is a great discussion, literally writing about it right now, sort of even arguing Damasio, who's somebody who is a who's some who's somebody who is a very powerful theorist about this issue of which comes first, and it is
Yeah.
a chicken and egg somewhat. But Albert Ellis, the psychologist philosopher, said is really a threefold way of looking at this, and that is that emotion is a product, and we're in emotional states all the time, even if we're not recognizing it. But emotion is a product of your, and I'll call this perception process.
Yeah.
So here's a piece of input. You're getting this information. You're walking down the street. Someone just came over my door and knocked on my door, and I had to deal with it while we're in the midst of our conversation. I got a call from my daughter just now that I had to decline. And okay, input, right? Now, what's my belief system? That's the ABC of emotion. A is input, whatever information you're getting. B is your belief system. And your belief system essentially is how do you perceive the world?
Yeah.
And each of us does that differently.
Yep.
C is the outcome, which will be an emotional reaction. So
Yeah.
therefore, if you have a belief system that people are dangerous and you get on a subway, that's the input, getting on the subway. The belief system is what I just said. That's perception. People are dangerous. So your emotional response may be immediately anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
Someone else gets on the same subway, who has a belief system that people are essentially kind and generous and sort of fascinating and wants to engage rather than push away. Belief system, perception.
Yeah.
They get on the subway, it's kind of fun. They may even engage in a conversation with somebody next to them if they get curious. Totally different kind of emotional response to the same input, but it's based on their perception. So what I'm saying is, in this sense, thoughts in a way precede emotions.
Yes.
Now having
Perceive.
proceed, but now having said that, here's something that the scientists are getting into, and this is something people have known for years. But there are actually 6 facial expressions that every culture in the world has to express an emotion. There's joy, there's sadness, there's fear, there's disgust, there's anger, and I've left out one, but we'll find out what it was. And since probably this is most important. But the point about this is these faces all, surprise. These faces all look the same, no matter where the culture is. Now the question is, and this is where Damasio and a number of thinkers are sort of investigating: are there inherently within every single human being certain emotions that in fact are there from birth? Now, how you access them is what I'm talking about, but they're sort of there. So fear and anger and joy and sadness and disgust and surprise are examples. Are there always with any being that you've got? And it's fascinating because when you work with actors, which what I do, is we ask ourselves, what is the character's perception of reality that character has, so that emotions will flow appropriately. You don't ask the actor, although some directors do, oh, I want you to be sad. Now, here's fascinating. If I said I want you to be sad, we might get into fake it until I make it, and get a sad face on the rest. But do we believe it? Probably not. It's probably indicated behavior, as we often say, rather
Yeah.
than something that's believable. But it's interesting. I was taking an acting class with Tim Robbins' Actors Gang, which is over here in the West Side in Santa Monica
Yes.
with us, and they teach a concept much like comedy dell'arte, which is a theater that sort of was in the 1500s and earlier, which was mask theater in a sense, those same emotional faces that I'm talking about. And they literally believe that there are 4 states that any actor can get into immediately, and they are sad, happy, fearful, or fear, and anger. And in their exercises, they'll suddenly yell to the actors who are doing something, anger, and all of a sudden everybody will turn fear, and everybody
Yeah.
change the state. Is it really true? Do we really believe it? Cognitive art is exaggerated behavior, but it's
Yeah.
a fascinating discussion. I would say, as I said back, in a lot of words here, but I would say simply perception, quote, equaling thought, precedes emotional reaction.
Yeah. Really good, Jeremy, because that's what I'm after. It's me and you psychoanalyzing the wording on the questions. So I'm after changing the verb or saying you can say I'm for anecdotes, stories, tangents, and you don't have to answer the question. So here's the next one. That was really good. You taught me so much there. I filled my whole page with notes. I'm on page 2 already.
All right.
Okay.
I hope you're recording this.
Oh yeah, it's well, here's the amazing thing, Jeremy. We're live across the world right now. As
That I
soon as soon as the button ends, it's on YouTube forever, unless they turn on YouTube off. But the flip out on the Joycean connection is 1939 TV telephone is New York World's Fair. 39, the same year as The Wake came out.
wow.
Then when did it become a reality to most of us? 2001. He calls his daughter from the spaceship on telephone. That's what we're on. And that's why I say Joyce invented Zoom and disguised it as a book.
Love it.
Okay, so here's the next one. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Well, I'm constantly in thought. In other words, I have, like many people, a chattering monkey. So
Yeah,
it's always there. The question is so that I'm always commenting on. I'm rarely quiet in my mind, even
yeah,
with various meditative processes. That's and mindfulness, which
yeah,
but I'm very rarely silent. And in a way, because now I have something called tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on which doctor who
yeah.
never knows what it is and how to cure it, says when I'm quiet, I'm suddenly hearing this buzzing noise. So my
Wow.
point is that my brain is always active and always thoughtful. Um, I will sometimes sort of want to step back and become the observer of the thought to see if there is some resonance to it. So there's this, here's that thought. Let's step back and sort of see it in a meta context. And when I can do that, oftentimes either that's a confirmation of that thought or it's no, let's go deeper.
Well, that's what I would say. You say, I don't know what I think until I observe and step back, that or reflect. But this is McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So here's the next one. Can humans think without language?
What a great question. I I sense that humans can perceive without language. In other
Yeah.
words, it's the interesting thing as do you use that as okay, here comes the bear charging at you. Do you run and then do you get afraid? And
Yeah.
there's an interesting dialogue because the physical feeling of running as a response, well, there's got to, we'd say there's a thought. That's dangerous. That's a thought.
Yeah.
The question is, before we were in the world of language, would we still be running from the bear?
Yeah.
So there's something that would suggest that there is something that precedes language. But here's sort of a fascinating cultural and philosophical thought. In the culture that I come from, and that's I'm a Jew, and the culture that comes from studying deeply into this 3,000-year-old culture with brilliant minds left and right, arguing over centuries about meaning and ethics and all the rest. But one of the things that is part of the spiritual approach to this particular approach to existence says that the first thing that was created were letters, were the Hebrew letters, that they preceded existence. Now, what do you do with something like that? That doesn't make any sense at all. But at the same time,
Yeah.
is sort of saying there is a way of sort of if everything's interconnected and everything's one thing, and yet everything is also manifested in the incredible diversity of existence that we experience, the diversity of everything behind me, the diversity of you and me right now, the diversity of anybody looking at this, these incredible manifestations of differences within existence. But you say it all comes from one thing. It's almost Platonic in the same straight sense, and all this is pre-Plato, is the idea is there something that precedes
Yeah.
the language, that precedes existence, that emanates existence? Now, look, I'm just sharing this concept with you. I'm not saying I say, yep, there's no question that these letters were the first thing that was created. I'm not saying that. I'm just sharing with you and this discussion about language itself.
Yeah.
But
Look
also,
at
for me, one of the things that makes Joyce so fascinating is the limitation of language. I mean, there's
yes.
a famous phrase, which is if you want to a God defined, which is language, a God defined is a God confined,
Yeah.
meaning that the language itself already is limiting. If you say the word tree, well, we all have images of tree, but that's not a tree, and that
Yeah.
limits tree into sort of like the form of tree that you see.
Yeah.
But the variety of what tree is, I mean, you could spend a lifetime with just one tree and be totally immersed in everything it has to offer. So there's limitations to language. And that's why Joyce is brilliant, because Joyce creates
Yeah.
another language.
Dude, that was so good because you anticipated a question. You must have ESP, but I'm not going to ask it quite yet because follow the line, the what do you call that? The through line here.
Yeah.
This is Chomsky. A language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
It's there are two things for me. First of all, I agree with that. And as we examine various languages, and I'm not a linguist, but you'll see the meaning of something from another language translated into another language often gets lost
Yeah.
because it's not the same meaning. And so, you'll say, so, I mean, I'll use it in Hebrew, you say the word shalom, and everybody thinks the word means peace. Okay, that's famous, greetings. It doesn't. The word actually means whole, like WHOLE, like the wholeness of existence. So when you're saying shalom to somebody, you're saying all of it,
Yeah.
not just you, me, all of it.
Yeah.
It's like, saying namaste to somebody. And,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Namaste. And when it translates, it means sort of like, I see in you what I see in myself, or I see in myself what I see in you. So it translates, but it loses that if you were saying, by the way, Terry, I see in you that I see me, and then you and me, and we, or ye and we, and instead of namaste, which does the job. So that's a partial response to what you were asking. But
Yeah.
go back to the question, because I haven't answered it solidly. Ask it
Yeah.
one more.
But I got three little quickies. I would go back to. One is we say it in our yoga class, namaste in bed. And
Great.
then what you did was there's someone, it's not really great documented, but someone said etymologically the word translate is rooted in trader.
Wow.
So that's I know. Yeah, well, you're gonna still translate. I interviewed the guy who translated the Wake into Russia last week. It was amazing. You can't translate to Russia, but you can try, and he did it, and he got it published.
That's great. That's great.
And then the back to the define word, I just wanted to really quick inject. Mallarmé, symbolist poet, to define is to kill, to suggest is to create.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Love.
So the question is what do you do when language breaks down? What do you do when language doesn't work? You're at the store and the clerk, blah, 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 just simple like breakdown of,
Well, one thing is you can use body
yeah,
to indicate.
yeah,
when language really breaks down, particularly if you're into a conflict with somebody and you haven't been able to get out of it and be able to say, wait, can we just stop for a second? I know we disagree and I know we're angry with each other, if not enraged with each other. Can we just stop?
Yeah.
Could we just sort of look at each other for the next 10 seconds before we
Yeah.
continue this? Just, acknowledge that we're here. So there's a possibility of the contact. And what's kind of also intriguing is, particularly the time we're getting into with AI's development to getting sophisticated every single moment that we're seeing it, that the two of us could be AI characters right now.
Yeah.
The question is, when will we not know we are not AI characters?
Yeah.
And in a way, this is a response to what you just said, not by the words that we're going to exchange, but actually being in each other's physical presence. And, those of you who like to go to theater, the difference between going to theater and watching something on TV.
Yep.
There's something in the sense of when you're in the moment with somebody in their physical presence, there's a part of it that it really is unknown. You really don't quite know what the next moment's going to be.
Exactly.
Your mind predicts it, but you don't really.
Yeah.
Whereas and then this one of the horrors of social media is there's this flat way of, quote, avoiding and therefore attacking and destroying and insulting and bullying that this all represents, because we're not really connecting. We're connecting through this flat screen. And speaking of McLuhan, there was this great moment, and I can't remember what book this was in, and we may have talked about this before, and I learned this when I was in film school. Supposedly, he tells the story of a group of people who were in I'll call it a less advanced culture somewhere, and I don't know whether it was in Asia or was in Africa, that had not seen, for example, any book and had never seen a movie.
Yeah.
And they were interested in specifically helping them do healthier things like being able to build sort of earth latrines. Okay, specifically, how do you dig that? How do you do this so that you can make it less dangerous for your community if you don't have the kind of, quote, bathroom etiquette that may be healthier. Okay, so they put up a screen and they show this 10-minute documentary of how to dig a hole and whatever it was. Then they ask the people who saw this, "What did you see?" And they're all kind of looking at each other. And one of them says, I saw some chickens running.
Right. Where'd that chicken go? Because the protagonist is in the middle of the screen. We're trained to watch the middle of the screen, and they go, "Hey, where'd that chicken go?"
Even better. One of the things we notice that is true in terms of sort of movement on a camera movement is that when you're watching a movie, the brightest thing, like that thing over there, maybe the brightest thing in it's
right. The white.
My Near Death Experience called My Death. The brightest thing you look at and movement you always look at. That always that gets your attention in cinema. Any kind of movement you'll always pay attention to, and any kind of whatever's brightest. And that may be very much survival skills, particularly movement. But here's what they realized. They then look at the 10 minutes of this, film, and they saw, because it was filmed outside, in an outside environment, they saw, sure enough, over the left-hand side of the screen for 10 seconds, a bunch of chickens were running around.
Yeah.
So then they asked themselves, why did this happen? And what they realized was, before literacy, there was no such thing as focusing on a flat surface. Not at all. Because nothing in their environment is flat. Nothing. The earth's not flat, certainly. The trees and the sky, nothing is flat. Everything is three-dimensional in movement. So therefore, to ask them for 10 minutes to literally focus on flat surface, they couldn't do it. It wasn't part of their physical capacities at that moment. And that's fascinating, because McLuhan was observing what literature, what writing, what printing, what obviously all cinema and everything else, all were dependent on the capacity to focus on a flat surface.
Yeah. Boy, you help suss that out. I use that all the time, but I don't go into that depth. And you really taught me a lot there, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Because there's another one Marshall says, and this way he's chalked off as a charlatan. He got this from anthropologists like Edmund Carpenter was teaching in North Ridge and giving the camera to the people they were filming, the first guy to do that. And so Marshall knew who to tap into to learn this stuff. But when he said this one, I really love it because it sounds sort of hokey. It's like humans invented point of view when the vanishing point happened in paintings. Like, so before that, they go, well, I like radishes, but I don't like the green top. It's like, did humans have a point of view, pre the vanishing point? Well, he sort of said it really got developed more there. And what you're saying is literacy is like, you'll love this. One of McLuhan's mentors who I got to study with, Mary Jane Schultz, she invented the word splitteracy, that when we invented words, printed words, it split the right and left hemispheres. And she spells the S with a $sign.
Wow.
Splitteracy. So that was really good. Now,
wait a minute. That one I'm writing down.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, Mary Jane just died. She used to advise. Norman Mailer used to send his books to her. She was a housewife in Ann Arbor, Michigan with kids, and she read McLuhan. It changed her life. She turned McLuhan on the Gaia principle. She studied with the Ivan Illich, and she was at the media ecology session in the Bahamas where Bucky Fuller spoke for 8 hours, and they clapped. So he spoke for another 8 hours.
I think I've actually heard about that session because there's this filmmaker who's done this Bucky Fuller live film event, which I saw in New York about 3 months ago, and we're talking about the fact that Bucky could talk for hours and just could do it, which is just incredibly exciting.
Yeah, so cool. Okay, so then your observations, Jeremy, of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Well, we actually are more feeling beings, but not aware of it.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And particularly in our culture, where certain sets of feelings are regarded as or feelings / emotions, and there is a difference between those two words, but are looked upon as wrong and bad. So instead of looked upon as, this is just the way I am expressing myself now. This is what something has, quote, triggered me, and here's my emotional response. Coming up with the idea for, it's a perfect example about what just happened at the Democratic National Convention. The son of the President Walz's son got so emotional that he was, literally crying in pride, saying, "That's my dad."
Yeah.
Now, that moment, which I know has become a meme, was so powerful. And I didn't know anything about this kid. I didn't know that this kid has challenges. So I didn't know anything. All I knew was this was a human being, literally allowing his emotions to absolutely flow. Now, here's what's fascinating. What does the other side do? They mock him for being too, quote, emotional.
Yeah.
Now, here's an issue that we could suffer from in our society, which is the denial and the making wrong of emotions.
Yeah.
When in fact, you're in an emotional state all the time. You just are. You're just not aware of it. But, right now, Jerry, you may be feeling good and feeling positive, whatever it is. And I may be feeling sort of enthusiastic and excited and whatever these words are. And they're going on all the time.
Yeah.
And we're not naming them. In English language is not very good at naming emotions, nor are we, even worse, acknowledging them. So although we're a constantly emotional being, we have suppressed so much of that as being the way to live. Boys aren't supposed to cry. I mean, that's, ridiculously, we've heard it 1,000 times. Now, things are changing. There's no question, which is good. But to deal with this idea of, are we thinking beings or emotional beings? First of all, we're both. And but here's the thing that I want to jump onto, because the distinction between thought and emotion in terms of philosophers and, Descartes, and then, no, not Descartes, but the point is that, I think, therefore I am,
Yeah.
I'm misquoting now. The point is that really true, or is in fact thought and emotions happening constantly? As I said, the way you perceive, which is some degree thought, I believe precedes emotion, and working with actors, that's how we get them to get emotional. But the other thing that's really powerful, and I've been sort of re-examining this, is William Blake. William Blake, coming from a place where he's saying there is not the distinction between the material and the spiritual world. They are one world.
Yeah.
There's not the distinction between thought and emotion. They are joined together.
Yeah.
And then his aspect, which was, he said, but this is the thing about human beings that makes us somewhat an exceptional species, is our imagination,
Yeah.
which he believed proceeds everything, proceeds
Yeah.
thought and feeling, is our imagination.
Amazing. So good. Okay. One is 80%, 40 years I've been asking that question. 80% of people go, I think we're more feeling beings. So they literally, and that's 80% say feeling. Okay. Now we think, I agree with you. We invented the word thinking and we invented the word feeling. So we think we can separate them, but it really is, like Blake said, it's the yin yang. But then there's the DNC example you just gave me made me cry right now. I teared up, and I always know when I tear up or the person I'm interviewing tears up, something went good for that one. So I thank you for having. And then Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think," and I'm like, good luck. How can you turn your brain off and just surrender like people who meditate?
Well, listen, I find this really, this is getting personal, but I find this really sort of also intriguing,
Yeah.
that sexuality does have thought and imagination to it.
Yeah.
So that, from the bad thing, wait, but who are you thinking about while we're doing this? I mean, well, I was thinking about, but the point was, we're doing it because I'm thinking about it and it's turning me on. What can I tell you? I'm glad we're here and we're doing it. But to think about the idea of orgasm itself. Now, if you're Taoist, you don't want to get to orgasm too quickly. But the point is, if you think about orgasm, that's the point at which you're no longer thinking. I don't think anybody is having a thought when they're having an orgasm. They have a thought right before it, and certainly it's right after it. But at that moment, and now becomes the interesting idea about I don't know what the French are saying or something like that. It's the small death, meaning that at this moment,
small death, yeah,
quieting the mind, really silencing the mind, is that a stage, quote, of quote death? Is that not in a negative way of death?
No, that's beautiful.
Just that capacity to be silent.
Yeah.
Which I find incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
But I understand why some people say that is potentially a intention, an aspiration to actually get to silence.
Beautiful. Thelonious Monk, silence is the loudest sound in the universe. but listen, Jeremy, you really are a great listener. You're a great talker. You're like me. We could blab forever, but you are a great listener, because when I throw in that Bridget Bardot, no one really goes off and says, well, let me address that for a second, because I just do these prompts and I throw them off and it's an overload. That's like, don't do so many quotes before your questions, but that's who I am. So then the other one is Frank Zappa teaching us you can't laugh and come at the exact same time. Now, I mean, maybe somebody will say you can. Good luck. You can't.
More important is when you laugh after you come.
Yes.
That's
but the exact same moment people go, yes. I said, no, you can't laugh, sincere laugh, and come at the same time. Okay, but then this is a really good one, because there's a car on our street or nearby, since we live 4 blocks from each other. that has a bumper sticker and it says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I go, well, you could word it, "Don't believe everything you feel."
I think, and I mean, I think on that comment that both of the things you said are in fact accurate. One is if you suddenly are in a state of rage, a feeling, if you do step back and examine what that's about, it may change the way you feel because you quote are examining it. And that's thought about a feeling.
Yeah.
In and it's certainly the issue of don't believe everything you think is of course true.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes oftentimes it's interesting, those people in this group who are looking at this who did est or landmark may be very familiar with this concept of where you believe someone has these thoughts about you. That's your thought. I believe, I think they think this about me.
Yeah.
Then you get in their presence and you say to them, listen, and this is the qualification, you say, from my point of view, which means I could be totally inaccurate. It's really important to say that, from my point of view, which can be totally inaccurate. It is my point of view, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. But from my point of view, I think that you have these attitudes about me.
Yeah.
Now, what often happens, particularly when it's in a negative space, that comment is, that the other will say, wow, well, that's not what I think. I mean, I have problems with you in this and that, but I don't, that's not. And all of a sudden, what's happening is the thought that you had, which generated a feeling, is not, in fact, accurate.
Exactly. Well put. And it's back to Frank Zappa didn't tell us. He asked the question, who are the brain police? He didn't say, oh, the brain police are evil consumer culture, corporate, or the brain police is the voice inside your head. He just said, who are the brain police? You suss it out. So here's
But
two.
think about that, because there's an interior and an exterior one.
That's it.
There's
Yeah.
the interior one where you judge yourself.
Yeah.
So that was, I'm bad. And making this distinction, by the way, between guilt and shame is really significant for all of us, because shame is saying I'm bad. That's a
Yeah.
thought about yourself, which oftentimes is quite inaccurate. You may have done something that has been hurtful to another person.
Yeah.
From my tradition, by the way, there was one. I'll quickly say there was this famous, I think, second century sage, brilliant guy named Hillel, and famous for saying, "If you're not for yourself, who will be for you? If you're only for yourself, what are you? And if not now, when?" That famous trial of statements. But he was asked by somebody, said, "Look, if you can tell me what it means to be a Jew while I'm standing on one leg, I'll become a Jew." So Hillel looked at him, obviously askance, and said, "Okay, do it." The guy's standing on his leg, and Hillel says, "That which is hateful to you, do not unto someone else." That's it. Everything else is commentary. Go study. I don't care whether you become a Jew or not, but that's the beginning. And it's interesting because it's coming from a place of that which is hateful to you. It's not coming from a place of, do unto others as you would, which is a positive and oftentimes difficult to do. I'm going to take care of them because I'd like to be taken care of. Well, yeah, but whereas I'm not going to hurt them because I don't want to be hurt. That one you can act on easier in the sense of where you are.
But that was good, Jeremy. If you say shame is I'm bad, what do you say guilt is?
Guilt is I've done something bad.
I've done something bad.
Now I can acknowledge that. I can also rectify it in some way, or, maybe not, but it isn't I'm bad. It's I've done something bad. And it's a difficult thing for all of us, because oftentimes when we do something that is hurtful to somebody, either intentional or unintentional, then we also add it to shame, which is, oh, I'm bad because I did that. And that's a tough distinction and an important one for us to recognize, because you're not bad. You have done something that is hurtful, and you can be reclaimed. But the inside and outside is interesting, because I'm talking about what's inside in terms of the thought police. The outside one is a major issue. I'm about to do a play called Porn Rock. Porn Rock is based on a trial that you may remember of the Jello Biafra and the dead Kennedys, Jello Biafra specifically. And the trial had It's based on an album that they did called Frankenchrist, and inside the album was an LP in those days, was a poster, and the poster was by Giger, the guy who did all the aliens, and the poster is absolutely can be interpreted as this is, quote, pornographic, or someone else might call it art, but the point is it's out there. And it became this trial because are you advancing, are you, trying to undermine the ethics of our children? And that became what the trial was. But this issue of what's right and wrong for us to be exposed to, that's the exterior thought police. And that's a dangerous space that to be in. And the idea that we are now in this country burning books
Yeah.
is a real place of us to be reminded what that really means.
No, I've asked Jello all these questions. I know that court case well. In fact, most people don't know, just to take it to the extreme, a judge in Florida, maybe 15, 20 years ago, made a kid who did comics, said, you can't do these. He literally restricted the kid from, and it totally fucked the kid up. And it was like, how did he get away with that in America? You can't tell someone they can't draw something with their pencil. So anyways, who wrote this play?
A guy named Larry Myers, a really good writer. It's a terrific play. The second half, by the way, which is going to be a lot of fun, is the second half is the audience, is the jury.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Well, we'll see, I mean, one night he may be convicted and we have an ending for that. One night he may be let go.
And is this going to be at Tim's Theater right down the street?
No, it's not going to be Tim's Theater. It's actually going to be a theater called the Eastwood Theater in Hollywood.
Okay, well, keep me posted.
East Coast Theater, I think it's called.
Yeah, keep us posted because I wanted to. This is where I thought we could interject this. I didn't want to go into this yet, but your book is so amazing. I mean, you have several of them, but this one, Directors Up Close, ends with the appendix, Elia Kazan on what makes a director.
Oh, it's
and I'm going.
But I now have to really sort of correct you now because you have the very first version. So here is just for the fun of it, since you've got it. Here is version 1, expanded of what you saw. Here is the second of directors close up, and here we've got people like Danny Boyle and Catherine Bigelow and Paul Thomas Anderson, Darren Aronofsky and Christopher Nolan, and Alexander Payne and David O. Russell, and this is impressive. Steven Spielberg, Marty Scorsese, this is, and many more in this one. And here's volume 3.
Yeah.
In volume 3, we've got people like Damien Chazelle did La La Land, and Richard Linklater did Boyfriend, and George Miller did Mad Max series, and Sam Mendes who did 1917. Spielberg again, what can I tell you? He's here all the time. Tarantino, Barry Jenkins, Ang Lee, Spike Lee, Clint Eastwood, Guillermo del Toro. For those of you who are filmmakers, these are. I would say, I got to just say it but they're talking, I'm editing,
it's
these are the best books on filmmaking. I think that particular film directing that exists, because you're going to learn from all the masters about how they do what they do.
Yeah, it's really well organized too. At least
that Kazan thing is phenomenal.
That's phenomenal. I hope that's online free too. But anyways, here's what I want to touch on just briefly, because it's actually jumping ahead of something we're going to talk. But because it almost seems appropriate, is they say, like, we talked about name calling. And one friend said, you don't call someone an asshole. You say you're acting like an asshole. So that's separating the sin from the sinner. So that it goes right to Kazan. Nick Nolte was the only guy who wouldn't stand up when the Academy gave Kazan his thing. And I was like so proud because I interviewed all my industry friends. I'm like, well, what do you think of him giving Kazan? Now we know Kazan's a great director, but can you literally separate the sin from the sinner in his case?
I think it's, first of all, it's an enormously wonderful, challenging question to ask.
Thank you.
Beethoven supposedly was a son of a bitch.
Right.
Does that make the Fifth and the Ninth Symphonies and the last quartets any less good?
Yeah.
So there's a real tricky question here. Oftentimes, My father actually, when I was young, used to bring this up about, do you need to know the biography of somebody to appreciate what that somebody
Yeah.
creates? And oftentimes, as we think about it, here's a story which you probably know, which was about Stravinsky. Did this famous piece called "Rites of Spring," and in many ways, it changed classical music forever. It may have changed music forever. And
Yes.
he was being interviewed, and he was asked the question, about the thing, and he said at first, "This is totally original music. No one has ever written anything like this before." Now, what an incredibly egotistic statement, right? Then he takes a step back and he says, "And I was merely the channel through which it
Wow.
passed." Now, think about that. That means that there are sort of people whose own personalities and behaviors and interpersonal relationships are, in fact, negative. They have been cruel to somebody, or mean to somebody, or done something illegal in terms of the society's laws at the time, and they're together. Does that mean that Galileo is a bad person? We shouldn't pay any attention to what he
Yeah.
did because the Catholic Church decided to, excommunicate him. I mean, is that where we are?
Yeah.
Or can we make the distinction between the creative process that somebody offers us and their personalities? And
Yeah.
the fact is that all of us are failed. I mean, that's the nature here. One of the reasons why I think we're humans here on this planet is we're going to school. We may not realize it, but we're going to school. And the school is to how to be maybe the very answer to the very first question when I said to you, how to truly be kind. That may be the school.
Yes.
And most of us, unfortunately, including me, get bad grades. Now,
Yeah.
do we have to, relive it? Well, maybe very well, depends on the belief system you have. You may come back to go to the same class again and again until you get it. So what
Yeah.
I'm saying is there's a level of people who offer us amazing gifts. And yet, if we examine their biographies, we say, I don't want to have them over dinner.
Yeah.
Does that make the gift still bad? I don't think so.
Yeah, really well put, Jeremy. And it reminds me of again, Frank Zappa said, "I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure."
That's because he
So,
can laugh.
yeah, here's two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
If you make a distinction, which is really difficult, and I ask you the same question: what does the word soul mean to you?
Yeah,
Can you make the distinction between your quote soul and your material being? Now, for many, again, in terms of the history of philosophy, many people said, Plato and others, and there's the soul and there's the human, and they are, or the human, the physical being, and they interface. And then they've got traditions that say we're a physical human being that has a soul, or we're a soul being that has a physical body. I don't have the answer to this because if you ask me the question, what's my soul? I cannot define it. And I cannot make a distinction of that was my soul as distinguished from
yeah,
this. Maybe the time, and I'll use this 2 years ago, I was at the beach and I saw a pelican that was on the sand. And I like to bicycle to the beach and go to the ocean. And it seemed to be moving in a strange, awkward way. And I started approaching it and tried to get away. And I realized there were fishing hooks and wires that it had gotten tangled in, and now it couldn't move. Now, the question is what to do. And there was a moment when it was very clear I had to help. What was the motivation? Was that my soul saying, here's another being in trouble, do something? I
yeah,
don't think it was my mind saying it.
yeah,
I think it was an identification with being. And
yeah,
maybe in that sense, which is pre literate, maybe in that sense, that's where the soul is. I say an early morning prayer. The Orthodox Jews do this. I'm not an Orthodox Jew by any means, but it's the last couple of years I've been saying this morning prayer. And the first thing you say when you get out of waking state into this state, or waking state to waking state, I should say, because that's interesting. I meant sleeping state to waking state. Ooh, ooh. All right, I am a dreamer. That the first thing you say is you thank that which is the creator. And in Judaism, there's no word for God. They're just four interesting enough letters that are unpronounceable. Just they can't be pronounced. they're just there. You look at these letters and they, quote, suggest, but there's no word for God. And you can't even say the word, can't pronounce it because it's unpronounceable. The Greeks tried to pronounce it and they ended up getting the word Jehovah, but it's not pronounced by anything in Hebrew. It's just that you say something like the name or the creator or something, but you don't say the words themselves. But the point is, the opening prayer is thank you, that which creates, for
Yeah.
allowing my soul to rise and be with me today. First thing. And yet, even though I say this every morning, I'm not really what is that? What is that? And
That's good.
I ask, do you know, Jerry? If I ask you the question, what does this word soul mean to you? How do you respond?
Yeah. Well, I go to Lily Tom. I says, reality is a collective hunch. We have a collective hunch what we think that word kind of means, because Jeremy, most people answer that way. What do you mean? What do we mean by the soul? Or they go, it depends on what you mean by thinking. Because I mean, in the big world, in the big picture, material world, they would say, no, the brain is the brain, thinking is a function of the brain. But they're trying to say, well, is the soul in the brain one? There's a question coming up where you'll see how I word it.
Okay.
Here, that was really good what you said, Jeremy. Again, you're a very sharp listener, and you know how that these questions I'm after below your stock lines, like, or the deeper, not just your stock lines, you get into it. Okay, the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Um, the answer is yes, because they do. I mean, if you perceive thinking as a kind of logical process, which it doesn't always have to be. In fact,
Yeah.
oftentimes it's a jump. But as you perceive that as even a mathematical process, then certainly machines do that. And what I love is that example that you probably know of the machine that was challenging this 2, 3 years ago, the Go champion.
Yeah.
The question is, Go supposedly is the most complex game, more complex than chess by gazillions or whatever. But anyway, possibilities that is. And there was a moment when the Go master was beating the computer repeatedly, and then there was a moment when they were in a mix, and there was a quiet moment, and the computer made a move in which the Go master looked at the move it had made, and he got up and walked away for 15 minutes and came back and said, that was absolutely beautiful. And there is no way I, the Go master, or anybody else who plays Go would have ever thought to have made that move. Now, this is an example of, can a machine think? Now, here's the interesting thing, because it goes back to, are we in fact already, and have always been, thinking machines?
Yeah.
Is there such a distinction? And again, with AI now, we're about to merge. It's Terence McKenna, this brilliant sort of thinker, and sort of exponent of psychotropics, once said that he believed that the next state of evolution would be for us to turn ourselves inside out. Sort of
Wow.
like the Pompidou museum in Paris, which is all the machinery that makes the things, all the, if you will, all the nerve endings that are inside us would be outside us. That there would be no surface containing them; it would just be that. And it's a way of seeing who we really are. And yes, from my point of view, they think.
Yeah. Really good, because McLuhan nailed it. He said technology is the most human thing. So anything we invent extends our humanness. But we'll get into that. It's coming up. Okay.
Because Prince, the formerly artist called Prince said, technology is cool, but we have to learn to make sure that it doesn't use us
Yeah.
and we use it.
Yeah.
So that's a place we're at as well.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I heard on KPFK because I know you're a fan of Pacifica. They said AI's in its infant stage, and it's our job to raise it well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Oh wow. I don't know if the more is the right word. I, I'm
That's what. Wait, Jeremy, that's one of my favorite. This woman said the word more doesn't function in your question, and I like love that because that's a yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, but it's that when my oftentimes a director working with actors will say, "I would like you to do this do it a little less, or do it a little more, or more." And of course, the actor wanting to cooperate is nodding and nodding and having no idea what the more is or what and so those words don't really aren't
Oh,
concrete enough. I know I'm an optimist,
yeah.
so there's a part of me, and that's not all the time, but there's a part of me that therefore enjoys the joy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that operates. Now, there's no question that I get anxious about. I think I get anxious more about sort of the political future of particularly our country right now, and very, very specifically our country.
Yeah.
And I get irritated by, I can't remember who the Algonquin writer who said this, which was that no one ever lost a bet by underestimating the stupidity of the American public. I just want that to be wrong, uh, but I don't know if it is wrong.
Yeah.
So that's where anxiety comes in. But most of my day is joyful, but I often do seek to understand and find meaning.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because a lot of people I'm with just say, I don't care about this. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what the afterlife is and to pursue it and find meaning. And oftentimes meaning itself is its own problem because we oftentimes give more significance to things than they quote deserve,
Yeah.
and more of our time and energy to that, as distinguished from, again, stepping back and saying this is as distinguished from this means.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I got it from Rick Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last and meaning tends to last. But what you said really reminded me of one of my favorites. Actually, Michael Silverblatt taught me this. They asked Robert Frost, could you explain that poem? And he goes, you mean you want me to say it worse? This thing about like, more or worse, like, well, yeah, if you explain the poem, I might get the meaning more. But no, it's like we don't know. The beauty is I kind of ask these questions and I want people to answer them the way I think to reinforce me. But I don't tell people. But when people say meaning, it seems to feel like, oh, they're more a meaningful person and they're flighty if they say happiness. But then they go, well, no, the word isn't happiness, it's
But when
joy.
you think about
And
it,
then,
and I like the fact that joy has been the word that's been used just recently because it's a
yeah,
great word. And
it's a great word.
joy is phenomenal.
Yeah,
But the idea, it's the Dalai Lama literally saying, everybody seeks to be happy.
yeah,
And it's a strange word because what does it really mean to be happy? And is it momentary? Is it transitional? Or is there an attitude about life, which
yeah,
is that, I mean, it's like Einstein's famous quote about there are only two ways to look at life. You either look at the life or the universe. You either look at it as friendly or you look at it as dangerous.
yeah,
That's it. And if you look at the universe as friendly, and that's a difficult thing to say because earthquakes, it's that friendly, excuse me. But at the
yeah,
same time, the moment it isn't happening, which is now, is
yeah,
totally remarkable. And
yeah,
so, you can look around. That's one of the reasons back on the word of collection. I mean, as I look around at various things, images of my family, images from movies I made, my Emmy back here, or the paintings that I've made over here, there's a certain kind of, it makes me sort of literally feel positive, feel good,
that's it.
therefore maybe joy. And in that sense, that's seeking to have, quote, happiness around me, or joy, which I like better as a word right now, than meaning. And
Yeah,
yet, I still, even in our conversation, I'm seeking sort of meaning. I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know, I do ask the question why we're here and how did
Yeah.
we get here and what are we supposed to do while we're here? And that's a lot of meaning. And some people will say, look, being here is the meaning. That's it. Anything else you do is kind of just commentary and not necessarily true at all.
Yeah. Again, really well put, because the other verb there is pursue. And people go, well, I don't know about pursue, happiness, and meaning. So here's the next one. And watch how I word this one, because it's tricky. I go, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? So is consciousness there bubbling away? And are we more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Um, First of all, having had a near-death experience, which was the most profound experience I've had in my life, and I wrote it up, illustrated, because I'm a graphic artist as well as a filmmaker, and it's got like 100 drawings in it, and it's called My Death: A Personal Guidebook. Now,
Yeah.
I'd never heard of near-death experiences. If you'd asked me beforehand it happened, NDE, I would have never had any idea what you were talking about. But among the many gifts and lessons from that experience was your body dies, your ego dies, and in many ways, even your quote memory dies. This is a tricky one, and I have to explore that. But one of the things that doesn't die is consciousness. Consciousness itself is ongoing, of which we all are a part of. And consciousness on the levels that we're talking about here is way beyond the way we have as the way we are conscious of the world. Now, if I were a deep physicist and mathematician, I might be into that same kind of consciousness that I'm talking about in the near-death experience. And this is shared by many people who've had these kind of experiences, because what they experience is there is a quote living unquote essence that doesn't die, and that you enter into, at least I did, and many other people do. And as you move through your own physical ego death, and then you enter into this symmetrical, perfect, calm, beautiful, serene, most surprisingly awesome isness that in fact incorporates past, future, and present. It's interesting, by the way, those 4 letters that I was talking about in Hebrew, that supposedly are, letters of word God in English, they can be permutated into it was, it is, and it will be, all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the essence of consciousness. Now, how do we get there? Do we get there? Now, what is deeper and far more challenging to sort of state is that in this state of consciousness, and I've shared this with other people who had a somewhat similar experience in near-death experience, you actually create everything that you, in your brain, knew. So every piece of literature, every piece of film that you've seen, every experience, every place you've ever been, every person you've ever seen, everything that you've ever experienced, that is all in here, whether we remember it or not, instantaneously is aware in this near-death experience, of this level of experience. And here's the thing, you realize you've created it. Now, who's the you? It's no longer me. It's no longer my ego. It's way beyond that. But there is the quote prime mover creator.
Yeah.
And at this moment is a hard thing because that's time. You've created it all.
Yeah.
It's like being the hologram of God. You're this teeny little broken piece of whatever it is, but it's all contained as in a hologram. You can't break it up. It's all there. The oneness of it all. And it's the thing that has made it all from the nothingness. And you're it. Now that's sort of a profound kind of experience if you can have it. That means
Sort of.
you enter consciousness to realize you've created it.
that you created it. Oh, that is so well. It's like we don't need no stinking museum of narrative art.
We are it.
We are it. What's faster, the speed of light or speed of thought?
I don't have an answer to that. My question is there something faster than the speed of light? Literally faster than the speed of light. Now, the one thing, I mean, when you think about what Einstein was offering us, which was that time and space are one, or it's space-time, as he called it, as distinguished from the distinction. So in that sense, then it's all happening, and then they're equal in a sense. That, you know, that the spark of the neuron is as fast as the spark of the, you know, the blast up from the sunlight. I just don't know.
Yvonne, excuse me, Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded, said, "You can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
Well, you're making me think of the Zen line, which is my house burned down, and now I can see the moon.
Oh, that is great.
So I'm not sure I can give you the tool to sort of deal with the master's creation. But in the end, I'm going to resort to the brilliance of William Blake and literally say imagination. I mean,
Yeah, oh, that's great. Yeah,
I
you get
feel
it.
that is the greatest tool we have. And
Yeah,
when you really, I mean, when you quote, think about it, it is. I
yeah,
mean, it's how all of creation exists because of imagination. If it's
yeah,
the creator's imagination that did all this, but it's the imagination of each one of us who've made anything. And
yeah.
what's amazing about this is this great, I think it was a TED talk. Somebody held up an ancient rock, you know, flint rock from, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, and then held up this. And they're both the same size, right?
Yeah,
And then he said, look, it took only one human being to make this, the flint rock.
yeah,
Can you, any one human being, make this?
yeah.
Of course not. And that's fascinating. That what I hold in my hand, I don't know how many thousands of people and how much imagination, how many thousands of imaginative people,
Yeah,
imaginations went into making this.
yeah, yeah, and it's you'll love that. You know this. The aspect ratio on the monolith in 2001 is the same aspect ratio of a cell phone.
Boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. I love
Okay, Jeremy, the this was again how it's me and the people I'm interviewing. One person says, "Well, how about a new toy?" So what new toy do you suggest?
a new toy. Oh wow! I see. I really like toys, and I particularly like action figures because of the imagination that I apply to the action figures. So, I would say a new toy that allows you to have your imagination active within whatever the toy is, and that could be obviously a game on a
Yeah,
computer, or it could be some kind of three-dimensional game thing that's there, but you have to participate in it. That
yeah,
you have to imagination. So that aspect of toy I could see.
beautiful. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, it depends on the night.
You know where I got
One of the
that?
things that I've learned to do now is
Yeah,
to not have any media, and particularly have any informational media other than that which I've already trust go into my brain. So
yeah.
therefore, I'm not going to let the whatever news apps that I have
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
the night before, to allow me to sleep. Um, and I because of and this has been because of this tinnitus that I've had now for about a couple of years, and I realized 20 million Americans have this. I mean, I had no
Oh,
idea, and nobody knows how to cure it. Um,
wow.
because of it, I do listen to a sound, and it's the sound of cicadas within the jungle and the ocean sound as well.
Mhm.
So I'm going to sleep with an entirely different environment
Yeah,
than I'm actually in. And that allows me to enter into sleep without anxiety, because now I'm being transported even before sleep.
Beautiful. So you're listening to an app or a tape of nature.
Yeah,
That's
something.
that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
very specific. The it's called, for those who are hearing, it's called Soundcore, and it's really terrific. It's and I you
Yeah.
know I think the device, you can get it on various places, called Soundcore. They fit easily, and you can sleep with them. And they have lots and lots of different sounds to allow you to calm down.
Beautiful, Jeremy. So cool. I have to tell you where I got that question. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night? Earl Morris Rumsfeld film.
Wow.
Isn't that and that film is actually like McLuhan talking for 90 minutes. That guy knows how to fucking how to do
Yeah, no,
like
what's interesting about but the brilliance of Errol Morris is, and he discovered this, he even patented, was he was able to figure out a way to
yeah,
ask people questions and then to have them, when they answered, look directly into the camera.
yeah.
And yet they saw him when they were asking.
Right.
And that's happening with us to some degree right now, because of what we can do now.
We're looking at the little green dot, but that's
But
you
in terms of film, this was sort of a new invention, which
yeah,
allowed him to actually allow people to feel like they're talking right with you, as
yeah,
distinguished from usually this in an interview.
yeah. But in Teratron, that's called. But check this out, Jeremy. This is Errol was asked to make the Oscars 5 or 3 minute piece to hoik up how great movies are. And he had Jello Biafra, John Williams, John Waters, and all these famous people. Eddie Murphy and Sean Connery both were kind of not cooperative with Earl, because they said, do you want me to pour my emotions into your eyes? We do it into glass lenses, dude. And that was like they realized the flip. Now, I love to say it, but all the power to him, because he did invent some that's an important tool, and
Yeah.
he definitely is a pretty good filmmaker.
Wonderful.
Yeah, McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Jeremy, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because we want to be secure.
We want to be what?
We want to be safe. We want to be
Safe.
secure.
Yeah, secure. Yeah.
I mean, and there's no reason why one would not want to be secure.
Yeah.
But reality is change. That's just what it is. Sometimes in very short time, if we're going to deal with time, or maybe much longer time. So the issue of our desiring to be safe has to do with the way we respond to this, because oftentimes what artists are doing, in fact, always what artists are doing, are showing us a new way of being, or seeing, or hearing, or whatever it is. That's what the artist is doing. And, for many of us, we can't take it
Yeah.
because it makes us insecure. I
Yeah.
know what kind of music I like. I don't want to listen to this. What's this? This is freaking me out. I can't make the next step into the unknown. And what the artist does for us is often step into the unknown. And when you talk to artists about how they create, even the artists that are more, let's say, controlling a process, they will always tell you about, quote, the accident that is in the.
Of course.
I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't expect that line to go there. I didn't
Yeah.
expect that sound to be there. And
Yeah.
that oftentimes is the magic, because there's this wonderful idea of being tenor. They had not, quote, intended it all. They definitely directed a lot of it, but some things happen. Now, whether you're Jackson Pollock and you're doing drips and stuff, who knows what's going to happen? I like these drips better than those, but I didn't control that drip to go that way. It's I find this, always when someone has a quote a new voice as an artist, they will sometimes challenge our basic belief systems. They just will.
Yeah.
When they do it well, like I don't know, like some of the artists you just mentioned, or like Bob Dylan as an example.
Yeah.
Where, yes, a lot of Dylan sounds are from other places. We've heard these sounds before. He didn't invent it. But the words, the poetry, that's his.
Yeah.
And some of it, was tough for people to hear
Yeah.
because it shifted the way they had been secure.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about a Weasley artist, man. I love him. And I have a Dylan event every year. But two things he said. So why did you say the line, I'm reading James Joyce in the middle of this song? And he goes, because it rhymed with the other line. Nah, he didn't want to say I was reading. And then he said a great one. If you played Muddy Waters as much as I did, you'd write Maggie's Farm too. He's actually pretty good about weaseling around the art process. Okay. Do artists have moral obligation?
Come see the play.
Whoa, that's good.
Literally, that's going to be a question that you in the audience are going to be asked if you want to participate. You don't have to participate, but if you like the idea of participating, you like the idea of live theater, and you like the idea of what was called immersive theater, you're going to have that. That is one of the questions you will be asked. And it's for me, the artist that does harm, in other words, something hateful to another person, which some artists do, that's the place where I will then question the value of the art. Is this art harming somebody else? For the artist who exposes, I don't know, excrement, well, let me harm some people. And that's, what they put inside a big piece of glass floating in the water. It's disgusting for me, but, am I going to say, not going to put it in my living room? I don't think I want it in my art gallery, but, there's a point at which, that obviously individual tastes are individual tastes. And you can like stuff and that somebody, and then that person next to you doesn't. And that's just fine. We do not have to all like the same anything. More important is not to deny another person's perceptions. But at the same time, it's a fascinating question of when and does and can art go, quote, too far. And, the history in America, history in the world of expression and First Amendment is all about this. About, Lady Chatterley's Lover. This is a pornographic book. It should not be published. Now, for those of us who read Lady Chatterley's Lover today, it's like, excuse me, I got about 10 sites that are public that, as long as I say I'm over 18, I've got far more graphic descriptions of sexuality than this wonderful writer. So,
okay, Jeremy, let me give you just a quick for instance in this regard, because you've really probably one of the great humans on earth that have talked to all the greatest filmmakers. So here's Louis Buñuel has Los Olvidados, street thugs beating up a wino, and we know Los Olvidados is a great film, but we don't want it to promote kids beating up blind street guys, whatever, underprivileged people. But then it goes to Kubrick being stiff-armed, literally, according to one documentary, by the UK police authorities, saying you have to pull Clockwork because it's causing kids to beat up winos. Now, my question is, what if did Stanley go along with that because it was pulled from UK screens for 30 years? It wasn't pulled from the rest of the world, and kids could go to London's back alleys and buy bootleg VHS tapes of it. But did Stanley go yes because he knew and thought that his film was causing kids to beat up winos, or did he pull it because he knew it was good publicity stunt?
First of all, I don't know the answer to that. We should ask Steven Spielberg. Steven might know the answer since they
No, but I'm saying your hunch.
But I don't even have a hunch about that.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But the subject matter itself is very, very important to me. As I said, I teach a class called Media for Social Change. And what is it that, in fact, motivates people to actually change their behavior by being exposed to any kind of media? And Clearly we do. From advertisements, I want to wear that, I want to
Yeah.
have that. So we absolutely, that's to some degree our possessions slash behavior. Or I want to move like that from that, the ad that I just saw. I want to be cool like that person or whatever. So yes, we change our behaviors in terms of particularly look based on imagery that we see. The question is, do we change our behaviors in terms of, let's say, being look at the word, being empathetic towards our others? Does it in fact motivate our behavior to be more hateful to others? And can that happen? And clearly it can happen. You look at a masterpiece like Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, and this is an admiration of Adolf Hitler. And
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. And
Yeah.
if you didn't know everything bad about this particularly hateful human being, you'd say, yeah, pretty cool. Wow. Oh, go for that. I want to be part of that marching group and celebrate this, and be all together now. Excuse me. So the question now becomes, you know, the damage that can be done by any kind of expression, any kind of creativity. And the question is, how do you get motivated? And so the question's always been asked, is violence in the media, particularly violence in movie, does that
Yeah.
generate violence in our culture?
Yeah.
Now, this becomes, I think, a significant question. It's not easy to answer. You can oftentimes, oh, please, violence in the culture precedes the violence in any media, and we're just copying it or whatever it is. And then you ask yourself the question, okay, here's the United States. This country has the most gun violence in the world, not just minorly. If you look at a chart of every country around, like, their gun violence line, and then you come to America, it goes off the chart. I mean, if you take like 10 countries, so like Japan and Germany and England, even Brazil, and you stuff them all together and you say, where's their chart on gun violence? They're here. Where's America? Like that. So, okay, what is this? What is this about this culture? It ain't our movies, but we do have an admiration for guns. We really do. And our movies and our media definitely take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I remember when I was, I think it was 21 Jump Street, one of those movies, not 10 years ago, whatever it was. And I happened to be in London and I was seeing an advertisement for it. And it was these two actors, cool in Hawaiian shirts and girls hanging on them. And you saw a gun, it's like in the, I don't know, a holster or one of them, but you had to really sort of look at it. It wasn't out. And when I got off the airplane and was driving home, there was an ad for the same movie in the United States. But what the ad had is these two actors, same actors, both of them guns out.
Yeah.
And now, what is this all about? This is selling to us what we supposedly want to see,
Yeah.
which is guns in use.
Yeah.
So I don't have a solution to any of this. I mean, I made a movie, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago called Shot, which was about what one bullet does.
Oh, I saw it. It's powerful. Very powerful.
Thank you. And I want, the movie did not get wide distribution, and so not a lot of people saw it. But the movie was made so that you could suddenly say, "What if it happened to me?" And maybe shift your attitude
Yeah.
about guns and the use of guns, and particularly the use of the kind of weaponry that should be only used in war, if you even want to talk about war. But there's something about this, and there's something about our media. I would say, and this is, I guess, more of an answer, we continue to exacerbate an issue with our media because it's popular, and it's also somehow psychic. And part of me believes that, now that I've made that movie and thought about this, that our culture has a psychic issue that gun violence is a representation of. Because when the Europeans came here, they literally used their technology, which we're talking about, which in fact was guns, to obliterate 90% of the people who lived here for thousands of years.
Wow.
America got established by guns, and the Civil War and slavery itself also established by guns.
Yeah.
So we have a debt in terms of our European heritage coming to this land and our treatment of the people who lived there way before us. and then the treatment of people from other countries, forcing them to become our labor force by using guns in both cases. And
Yeah.
I sense that psychically, why we're so obsessed with or overwhelmed by guns is because we haven't paid the debt. We have not said we're guilty of this. We need
Yeah.
to reframe ourselves, acknowledge, and do something about it.
Yeah.
We're not there.
Reframe, really good. I'm also fond of William Blake, and he says, "We become what we behold." And in the 130 years of cinema, we beheld a lot of guns. That's the guns and war. So, Jeremy, I asked for 90 minutes, and it's 90 minutes. Can you do a part 2 somewhere down the line, 3-4 months down the line?
If you think I have anything else to add, I
Dude,
enjoy being with you, Jerry. It's as
you
simple as
got
that.
you got a lot. I want to make it an 8-part Netflix series.
Well, listen,
Can you go longer now, 5 or 10 minutes?
yeah, absolutely. We're here.
Okay, let's go a little longer too. And I really appreciate it because next question is, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Oh, I'm much more afraid of old ideas. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Because old ideas are, and if there's such a thing as an old idea, oftentimes are restrictive rather than open. Now, there are some, I got to say this, there are some old ideas from sort of the most deeply spiritual sages of all kinds of cultures they're not old. They are just true.
Yeah.
So I'll make a distinction between old ideas, and new ideas. True ideas are the ones that I am most respectful of because they are timeless. And I think that's important to say.
Well, we're going to get into truth, but I don't know if it'll be in this part because I really want to go into this. We're making a film about archiving. And for 2 years, we've been digging deep and talked to all the great archivists in LA.
Have you seen this was on, I think, Netflix within this last year, an hour just about archiving film. And it's a brilliant one, so you check it out, because what was amazing about it was to learn something that I didn't know, which is archivists now are going back to film as the major preservative of a cinematic media. They're not staying in digital. They realize digital decays. What they're doing is using digital to actually totally improve, which they can. Something that was chipped and whatever it is, they can revive it totally with digital. But once they've got it in the form they want it, then they transfer it back to film. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, I'll talk about it a little, but it's basically when you migrate the media, then you don't destroy the master. That's all. If people go, oh, get rid of the master. I mean, they found a film in a parking lot in like Iowa a half a year ago, and it was no one had a copy. So, but here's the setup on this one. The word archive is 1400s, to keep safe, free from harm. 200 years later, it's what we know the word means: record preserved as evidence. But here's Charles Baudelaire. If you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try to only own the day you're talking, it will last forever. Reminds me of David Lee Roth, here today, gone later today. But it's also the basic 2 questions. I have a little more setup as, is archiving more innate or more invented? And do you have plans for your own archive? And then you can play off of some of these lines, because why do we have to save all this stuff if you and me know Eastern philosophy is to live in the moment? If we're supposed to be living in the present, Wyndham Lewis says artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. The Egyptians put stuff in their coffin with them. But is it really that important to save all this stuff, or is it more important just to keep moving on and make more?
Well, first of all, what we do is move on, and what we do is potentially we're in the supposing we live in 4 worlds at the same time. This is a cosmological thinking of what's called Kabbalah. And one world, the first world, this world which we know, it's called the world of making, and that's what we do. That's what humans do. So in that sense, we're always in the process of making. then when you ask the question that you just did, looking at this face, which is definitely not a young face, it's headed more toward its mortality. What's going to happen with all this stuff behind me?
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that thinks, well, the idea of a ghost sort of staying within our making world, and when a lot of people have had ghost experiences, and so that may be possible. That's not what my near death experience was about. But the point is, people say that, okay, so if I become a ghost wandering around, oh, what are you doing with that fabulous rug? Don't sell it. It's wonderful. It's a unique piece that came from 1947. And okay, what am I going to do? They're digital copies of stuff that I've made. I mean, I have I have all these art pieces that I've made. Luckily, one archive space, it happens to be the museum at Harvard, said that they would take them. So when I move on, whoever's there hopefully will remember to look at this moment, and under here you get access to the computer stuff to be able to say, "Oh, right, it says in the will this goes there." But what about all the rest of this stuff? Where does it go? And so one of my friends who you probably know, Bob Stein, who was one of the original creators of the Criterion Collection. Bob has been a collector all his life. He's just kept everything. And I'm not talking about things, more sort of writings and images, whatever it is. And Stanford University, in an archiving situation, said, "We want you to archive all this material." These endless boxes that he had in his basement, which I think he was doing for a certain amount of time. But then the question is, who's going to pay any attention to it? Years ago, for like 7 years in a row, I wrote every day a kind of diary, and I realized no one was going to read it, including me. And it's like, I record my dreams. I don't necessarily, I dip in every now and then, but I don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to read all of these dreams, because I'm the only one's going to read it. No one wants to know anybody else's dreams, unless they're inventive. But it's a fascinating question about being here now, and that's what we're supposed to do. You're sort of like going into, if you will, a Zen monastery, and the walls are empty. There's nothing there. They're just empty. Just going into a wonderful, Catholic Rococo church, and or going into Chartres with a spectacular stained glass, and you're just surrounded by imagery, and it's going to last for 500, 800,000 years, whatever. So I feel like for some people, it's really important to be able to delve deep into the past, and that's what archiving is, because it gets them more into the present.
Yeah.
And as you said, potentially more into the future.
Yeah.
If you look at and think about this, when you go to a museum and you see sort of the collection of work that an artist has done from, particularly it's retrospective, and you see the growth and the changes, and you realize that you too, having followed that artist, you too have grown through these changes. And that museum curated exhibit is a reminder of those changes that you've gone through, as well as the artists. So there's real value in that, even though you're looking at, quote, the past.
You touched on this because Zappa, he was a huge archivist because he used his archives to make his art. But then he says, hey, I don't care how I'm remembered. That's legacy. I don't want to be remembered. That's for presidents. But Joan Baez, they made the doc on her recently, and they said, you got any archives? And she goes, yeah, my mom saved everything. It's in a storage space, and it's never been opened for 50 years. So the documentarians, they hit pay dirt.
Think about this now, because we know this in terms of a number of people, like, for example, Kafka. Kafka wanted all of his work to be destroyed.
Yeah.
What he said. And he died young, and someone who was, in charge of it
disobeyed. They disobeyed. Yeah.
Then I was lucky enough to work with Sophia Loren, who is just a remarkable human being, and truly a remarkable human being. And she kept a very serious diary. And then she decided, and partially was a reflection of one of her great directors who was one of her mentors, DeSica, who once said when a whole bunch of jewelry was stolen from her, she told me, he said, listen, Sophia, don't cry over something that can't cry over you. But then she decided, and I think under the influence of DeSica, not telling her to do this, to actually destroy all of her diaries, which she did. And
Wow.
you think about on one level, oh, what stories, what who, and this and that, and all the rest of it, and they're all there, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And
But
yet, if you think about, Sophia Loren, and again, this reflects the earlier conversation about the biography versus the art, because
yeah.
you can see her art, and as long as you archive, and a good archivist archives some of those films, we'll be able to see two women for
Yeah.
centuries, and
Yeah.
therefore see Sophia Loren.
Yeah. But the Joan Baez story ends with she's being interviewed after the film came out, and they go, well, what are you going to do with your archives? And she goes, I don't know, throw it off the side of a mountain. And her assistant's on the side going, oh, we're negotiating with the Smithsonian right now. So, I mean, basically, we know it works both ways. But Jeremy, that what you taught me about DeSica and Sophia Loren is amazing. That's really beautiful. But is this, I know you kind of already answered this, but is this need or want to archive more innate or more invented?
Uh, well, first of all, it's inventive in the sense of the very process of archiving. That's incredibly inventive. Just what I was just explaining, that well, if you want to archive this way, now you can archive that way. I mean, just think about all the
Yeah.
inventions that allow the archiving to be so much more sophisticated, which I think is fabulous. So I feel that's a major aspect of where the whole concept of archiving is today.
Yeah.
It's fascinating too because Vid Idiots, which is a local,
Idiots. Yeah.
yeah, was a fabulous, fabulous store that had this great collection of DVDs and that VHSs even before that. And they sort of closed down. And now they've reopened in our area in Los Angeles. And they've opened and they contacted a number of us filmmakers, said, if you have DVDs of your work, we're putting together a collection again.
Yeah.
And I got contacted, and I'm sort of really excited because I don't know if the DVDs that I have in my office are going to survive once I'm gone, but I have a feeling in Video Idiots, they may survive a little longer.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the archiving of my past for the
Yeah.
particular future.
Believe me, my film festival is going to be 34 years in November, and they have a couple of my DVDs, and they used to host me. So I
Right.
appreciate Vidiots. They're in Eagle Rock, and they took an amazing old theater and revised it, and fixed it up.
Very exciting.
So let's just go into this last little area, and then we'll plan for a part two. It's really been enlightening, and I really appreciate this a lot, Jeremy. And because I actually in part two, I'd love to go into James Joyce deeper, but
Right.
this is Milan Kundera in The Unbearable Likeness of Being.
He translates, by the way, well into English.
Really? Okay. Well, here's his line. This is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can.
Oh,
Now you've talked about material and spirit, but if I'm a writer and I'm putting words on a piece of paper, how can they go further? That sounds like cosmic, but go ahead. Any thoughts?
I mean, I'm writing something right now. And literally, as just an hour or two ago, and suddenly this character said something that I didn't realize the character was going to say. Now, yeah, it's coming through me. I'm writing the words, and then this idea. Now, interesting about archiving. Okay, this is a historical piece about a guy who's called the False Messiah. Fabulous, fabulous story. And the archiving gave me an information about it. Archiving via the computer, obviously, and information gave me information that I didn't know about him. And then I was writing the scene, I suddenly, wow, that. And so, in a way, you are in this. You're in this improvisational space. It's a good word for music in terms of creativity and writing, where definitely it's your instrument. Dickens write like Dickens. You know what I'm saying? He's not writing like somebody else, but he's going to the same library archive that, in fact, Karl Marx went to, which is true. They checked out the same books, and being inspired by particularly child labor issues, out comes Oliver Twist. Now, the words of the writing in the process, I mean, there's wonderful stories about him. He used to have people over in the afternoon, and he had this long, tall desk that he stood by, and he would be writing while people would be coming over to have tea and talk, and he'd still be writing. And I am totally convinced, kind of like, that famous line about Oscar Wilde, when Oscar Wilde, heard some very great quote, and Oscar said, "Gee, I wish I'd said that." And the person looked at him and said, "Oscar, you will." So the issue of where this comes from, and you hear this note and you play that note, and yes, it's your instrument, but you're listening and you're affected by, and the next riff is not necessarily something that you predicted.
Yeah.
Well, Mozart said this phenomenal line, or it's attributed to him, which was, "You want to be unpredictable, but inevitable."
Yeah.
No, that's an amazing sort of idea about creativity. You're in the process of the unknown, and yet as you work with it and through it, through your artistry, it becomes as it in fact should be. And I can let the painting go.
Yeah.
It's the film
Wow.
is finished. I can let it do what it's going to do now.
It's like we're like dueling quoters. This is Billy Wilder. Make the subtleties obvious.
Yeah.
But here's Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet. Art is a product of the unconscious mind. Again, yeah. Well, it sounds cosmic and romantic and poetic, but really, I mean, you're conscious.
I would say,
Go ahead.
I would say in this case, I would shift it. It is a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious mind,
Yeah.
because you are saying, did I, this idea came to me, and I now am investigating it, and you know what, I like it. I'm going to use it. Or no, it came to me out of my unconscious, if you will, but it's not the right thing for this moment. Now, one of the things that we like to do and push our actors to do is to allow that spontaneity of the unconscious to emerge, because that oftentimes is being in the present, being in the moment, being in the unknown, and it makes us, as my colleague Norm Holland, a wonderful editor, said, it's the lean forward movement. It's that moment where you sort of lean forward. Ooh, what's happening? And that's because you don't really know what's happening. And in that sense, that's the magic you're constantly looking for, which in this sense is a blend between the unconscious and the conscious.
Beautiful. That's one of Marshall's greatest books. Take Today, The Executive as Dropout. He talks about feedback and feed forward. So I love that Norm saying the lean forward. In fact, that's what Zooms are all about. You go,
yeah, we use it. The constant. This is a constant in filmmaking. Ever since filmmakers could do it, it's the push in.
The push in, right?
It's the push in.
Here's a poetry critic, Helen Vendler. She just died. I write to explain things to myself.
Oh, well,
Any comment on that one?
Well, it's like certain poets, one of the most famous American female, Emily Dickinson, clearly was not interested in anybody else reading what she wrote. And I feel like if it is a kind of a therapy that makes you feel good, for a lot of other people, it's more like they'd rather read because it makes them feel good, or they go into another world when they read. For some people who are creating, they're in another world. And in that process, there's so much reward by being in there that it isn't so important that anybody else sees it. In terms of something like cinema, although I do respect a lot the sort of experimental cinema that began when cinema began, that was, not necessarily storytelling at all, and therefore potentially difficult to appreciate. I appreciate it. But at the same time, with my students at the School of Cinematic Art, I realized they want to learn the skills to be able to make something that other people will see and hopefully like. And in that sense, that's a trickier area. That's particularly in cinema, where you do want to be able to communicate to others and therefore it's not just a soul thing. So soul as SOLE. But interestingly enough, in the end, there's a point at which you have to recognize as a creator that you like and are affected by what you've made. And then you can quote abandon it for its own adventure. But when somebody does a scene and directs a scene and they don't particularly like it, but they think the audience is going to like it, I don't feel that that's the right space to be in. Make sure that you've pleased yourself. And that's such an important sort of thing about life itself. Don't
Love it.
forget, don't forget, push in to please
Push.
yourself.
I love that because I got to get personal for a second. My feature, Brother Side of the Wake, my two favorite criticisms of it was guy wrote for Jeopardy for 10 years. He goes, "It's the best film I never want to see again," which was funny because we didn't have people watching films over and over until Harold and Maude and King of Hearts. And anyways, I love that one. But my favorite is one of my best art critics in Comrades. He said, "It's a semi-mesmerizing, self-indulgent hodgepodge." And I goes, "Dude, that's perfect."
Not bad.
And I do want you to at least watch the 1 minute trailer because the trailer kicks butt. It's called The Brother Side of the Wake, and the whole thing's on YouTube free, of course. Okay, a couple more, Jeremy, because you anticipated this again. You have ESP beautifully. Breck asked Charles Lawton, "So why do you act?" He says, "Because people don't know what they are like, and I think I can show them."
Beautiful. Oh, that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful. And I feel like, Charles Lawton is sort of one of my favorite actors. And I was lucky enough when I was young to see him, and I didn't know who he was, in Stratford in England, where the Stratford Theatre is Shakespeare's theatre in that town. And it's a sort of model of the globe. And I saw him do King Lear.
Wow.
And I was in the nosebleeds with my family. And I'll never forget it. I mean, it's still as present to me as possible. And I remember they dropped crepe paper to become like rain, like this, but all colored crepe paper. And as he gives this famous speech, which is roar against the tempest, he got wrapped in it, and he was just trapped in it. And I feel like his Hunchback of Notre Dame is the best that has ever been made. And there was something about this human being. Because what actors do, which is so difficult for us to do, is they find within themselves the other, and then they bring it out truthfully.
Yeah.
When I said what I said earlier about the near-death experience and consciousness, in one sense, and a good physicist will potentially, or chemist will agree with me, that everybody that ever lived is inside everybody that lives, because we're all breathing the same air. We're made of the same atoms. The atoms don't disappear. They just reformulate. That's just the nature of nature. So we're everybody that ever was. But, it's difficult to be me. Are you kidding me? I can't be anybody else. But what an actor does is, whether they understand what I just said or not, on a level of their creativity, they can find the other in themselves and bring that other out authentically. So, in fact, we believe them. And then you get actors like Meryl Streep, who can create so many different human beings that we absolutely believe.
Yeah.
What a gift, what a skill.
Yeah.
And that is what actors do.
Yeah.
They show us ourselves.
So beautifully put too. And then for him to direct Night of the Hunter. Okay, that was good because you really personalized it. Seeing Charles Lawton, like my parents were walking down the street one day in some theater town, and I was a little kid, and Joey Brown was walking, and they go, "Oh, could you shake your hand with my son?" I was like, I got to shake Joey Brown's hand. So then
I got to ask Billy Wilder for advice, but that's enough.
Nice. I love that. Okay, Igor Stravinsky. No, like this is how, Jeremy, you go, Jesus, talk about name calling. Jesus.
But we already quoted Igor.
I know. Well, here's Igor. Most people don't know what they like. They like what they know. So this is the question is, my friend says music, the 3 T's: technique, theory, and taste. Technique You've learned how to make films. Theory, you know the structures. How does one acquire taste?
Um, Actually, one acquires taste by tasting a lot of variety.
Yeah,
If you only taste the same thing, that's what you know.
yeah,
That doesn't mean you're going to, quote, like what you taste. Ooh, this persimmon is, ugh, don't
yeah.
like it. Okay, but you tasted it. Oh, I just saw this movie that goes on for hours and hours and hours. And it was like one shot. Thank you, Andy Warhol. I, but I tasted it. And in that sense, to get over our fear, this is the way we perceive the world, to be able to experience new things, new people, new ways of expression, new tastes, develops our own tastes. So then you can say, I like this kind of coffee, but I don't like this one. But I've tasted them, and therefore I've made a conscious choice, a
Yeah.
personal conscious choice. So I think you develop tastes by experimenting in experiencing tastes.
Two good E words, dude. Most people go experience exposure. So I love when you say experiment too. Jeremy, that was brilliant because you also touched by saying that word, the other. And this was amazing because reading the Elia Kazan in your book, I was really moved when he talked about theater. And I've explored what we think may have been the first human invention, or just thought about it. And so people have said various things. My favorite was an art student told me once, lying was the first human event. So, people say the line. That's the other thing, the line, like George Carlin, another great Venetian who I worked with, said the job of the comedian is to draw a line and cross it. So,
I think of a solid dream is draw a line and stumble over it.
Brad. So, well, there's Buster Keaton. How do you turn your stumble into a dance?
Yeah.
But there's many great theories. What was the first human invention? Tool, language, and then gaze, the gaze, because the human sees the other human in their eye reflection, and that's a mirror. So they see their reflection in water like a mirror, but they also see it in their eyes. Maybe that's what a baby first sees, is their face in their mother's eye. But I love the gaze line in my friend, who's a great actor, says other was the first human invention when we discovered that we were something other than just the self.
Yeah.
So then the last one, just you can suss it out how you may, and I look forward to it, is that's what theater of the oppressed, Augusto Apollo said. The first human invention was theater, which sort of encapsulates all of them.
In a way, let's put a positive spin on that and
Yeah.
say the first human invention, and it can't be really credited to humans because other species do it, is play.
Yes. Oh my God.
That allows us to sort of like inch into theater because theater is a play, at least in our language, in English. So
Yeah.
there's that. And then there's also the inventiveness of what play is. And
Yeah.
there's also the presence of what play is.
Yeah.
A good play, don't know what's going to happen next, but you're willing to be there.
Yeah. That is so great. I asked Eric McLuhan, I had this stupid question years ago. I says, after the word the, explain your life in like one word. Like Zappa's was The Big Note. Joyce's The Wake. Kubrick's The Shining. What would yours be after the word the, just off the top of your head?
The ride.
The ride. I love it because what Eric said, his was the playground. And I says, what was your dad be? And he says, probably the playground too, which is amazing because it reflects back to Gestalt therapy, ground, figure ground, and then your word play. Play is so important. Walter Pater said, all art aspires to the condition of music.
Absolutely.
You play music, you don't work music. And we're lucky because we're music lovers.
By the way, I use that quote with my students, the
It's a
Walter
great,
Pater quote about all art aspires to the state of music. And then I ask them, what does that mean? speaking
Yes.
meaning. And what's fascinating is some will sort of get it quickly in the sense that it means that the art is, particularly music, penetrating beyond the definitions of the mind and
Yeah.
going to the heart.
Yeah.
Because the basic element of all music is a beat, and the
Yeah.
basic element of the heart is a beat.
Yeah.
So music is sort of going directly into your, if you will, nervous system in the most positive way of that word, as distinguished from being filtered through your judgment system. And
Yeah.
therefore, art that can do that, is incredibly effective because then it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Because then you literally quote feel it.
Yeah. It's the mama heartbeat. It's like the mother load. You just described it. And it's been such a pleasure, Jeremy. I look so forward to part two. And I thank you for participating in our Joyce meetings. I mean, you must have come for some 8 or 10 years because when I interviewed you 8 years ago, I think we had known each other for a couple of years. So we love when you come to the Joyce meetings, and we really appreciate all your work. I look forward to your play and all your books. Thank you so much. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Well, here's my never ending.
Nice. My dream. I love it.
It's my death.
Oh my God. I read it because see,
My dream too. Don't worry about it. It's both.
it's in reverse, and I've got Lex Dixie. I mean, Lex Dixlexia.
Anyway, bless you, man. Thank you. This is a lot of
Thank
fun.
you, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Good luck to